You stand at the edge of a crumbling cliff, the wind slicing across your cheeks like a blade of ice. Below you, jagged rocks vanish into a churning sea, and above, nothing but fog and sky stitched together by the cries of birds you'll never see. There are no signs here, no trails, not even footprints, just a kind of silence that hums in your bones like the earth itself is holding its breath. Welcome to the places you were never meant to go. Some corners of our world don't just resist visitors, they erase them. A volcanic island in the middle of nowhere, ringed by waves that could split steel. A room inside a concrete building that no one talks about, but everyone fears. A pool of water so acidic it hisses when touched, and so hot it cooks the air around it. Some places are wild, some are haunted, and some are locked tight behind metal doors. Yet all have one thing in common: you cannot visit them. Not today. Not ever. You might think the world is fully mapped, that there's nowhere left untouched. But out beyond the cities and the satellites and the selfie sticks, there are zones where even the maps keep their distance. Remote islands with no harbors. Government vaults sealed for the end of the world. Deserts that ripple with heat so fierce even your thoughts feel scorched. Some are stamped restricted in capital letters. Others are wrapped in myth and murmur. And some just don't want you there. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Go ahead and post your location and local time down in the comments. It's always fun to see where we're drifting off from tonight. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. You shuffle along now, deeper into the hush, stepping into that in-between place where story and shadow meet. These aren't just places we forgot. They're places that push back. Places where the air doesn't want to be breathed, and the ground politely but firmly asks you to leave. Some are geological. Others are political. All of them hum with a quiet message, not for you. What makes them so mysterious? Sometimes it's what's missing. A lifeboat with no ship. A bank account with no country. A hole in the ground that goes too deep and tells us too much. Or nothing at all. And sometimes it's what we can't stop imagining, the secrets behind those closed doors. The things that might wait beneath the sulfur lakes, or in the endless dark corridors under a city we thought we knew. These places aren't in our dreams. They're real. They're out there. And tonight we're going to drift toward them, gently, quietly, one forbidden place at a time. The wind hits hard here. Not the gentle rustle of a breeze, but a sideways force that seems to scream across the sea without pause, flinging icy mist against your face like a slap. The sky is a dull smear of gray, the horizon lost in haze, and somewhere out there, in the vast nowhere between the southern tip of Africa and the ghost edge of Antarctica, floats a place so isolated, so off the map, it might as well be a rumor. But it isn't. It's real. Bouvet Island, the most inaccessible island on Earth. You don't arrive here. You earn it. Not that you're likely to get the chance. The waters are too violent, the cliffs too steep, and the island itself, well, it's not what you'd call welcoming. Just 19 square miles of volcanic rock and glacier, rising like a jagged tooth from the sea. No harbor, no dock, no human footprint that sticks around long enough to leave a shadow. Bouvet doesn't care if you come, and it certainly won't help you leave. Technically, it belongs to Norway, though you'd be forgiven for thinking no one owns it, like trying to lay claim to the moon. It was claimed in the early 20th century, declared a nature reserve by the 1970s, and then mostly left alone. Because really, what are you going to do with a place like Bouvet? It has no trees, no grass, barely any soil, just a thick glacier covering 90% of its surface and a slice of exposed coast charmingly named Nyrysa, or New Rock. That's the only spot a helicopter can land on a very good day if the fog lifts and the wind takes a coffee break. But let's be clear, you're not here for the view. You're here because Bouvet is more than rock and ice. It's mystery. Let's rewind to 1964. A British expedition arrives at Bouvet, led by a Royal Navy weather ship. It's a rare moment when the sea ice thins just enough to allow a team to land at Nyrysa. They scramble over wet stones and creaking glacier, collecting weather data and geological samples. But then they see it, a lifeboat, just sitting there. Not wrecked or rotted, but intact, upright, anchored. Not the kind of thing that washes up by accident, and certainly not something you expect on an island with no port, no people, and no recent visitors. There were barrels nearby, some broken debris, and signs someone very recently had been there. But no footprints, no notes, no name on the boat, and no clue where it had come from. A ghost boat. That lifeboat has never been traced to a specific ship. No missing crew was reported. No storm survivors ever turned up. And let's not forget where we are. Bouvet is over 1,000 miles from the nearest known land. You don't just wash up here. You have to try. And that wasn't the only odd thing. Back in 1955, a South African expedition claimed to have seen strange structures. Metal poles, what looked like a weathered hut, scattered debris on the same island. But later expeditions found no trace. Either they saw something that wasn't there, or something that didn't want to be found. Cue the conspiracy theories. Some say Bouvet was used during the Cold War, a secret observation outpost where you could disappear off every radar. Others claim it's the perfect place to test things no one should ever test: bioweapons, experimental tech, or worse. A setting for fictional bases in movies like Alien vs. Predator only adds to the mythos. No one lives there. No one patrols it. It just watches. But as delicious as these theories are, they're all speculative. The only confirmed activity on Bouvet today is occasional scientific study. It's part of a unique subantarctic ecosystem that helps researchers understand climate patterns and life at the edge of survival. A frozen baseline untouched by human interference. A control group in Earth's great experiment. Still it lingers. The feeling that this island doesn't want you here, that it's holding something back. And when you're on Bouvet, even briefly, even through a camera lens, you feel it. The weather doesn't help. Temperatures hover just below freezing all year. The wind is relentless. Fog swallows visibility without warning. Even satellite images struggle to catch a clear look. It's usually just a smudge of gray on gray. No ships pass close. No planes fly overhead. There are no flight paths, no fishing routes. Bouvet is not on the way to anything, and maybe that's the point. Because in a world so tracked and tagged, so mapped and monetized, a place like Bouvet feels like a glitch in the system. A reminder that not everything has been folded into the global grid. That some places resist, that they're meant to resist. Historians still debate whether the lifeboat was from a secret Cold War expedition, a forgotten scientific visit, or something more mundane, like debris carried improbably by the currents. But they all agree on one thing: it shouldn't have been there. and neither should you. There's something almost philosophical about Bouvet. It doesn't need drama to be haunting. It's the silence, the total indifference, the way it sits there, unmoved by our questions. It doesn't confirm or deny. It just exists. Some scientists say Bouvet may hold clues about how life survives in the most extreme conditions, its hardy mosses and seabirds thriving in spite of cold wind and isolation. But maybe its most important role is simpler to be left alone, to show us that the world still has edges, blank spots, places that don't want to be understood. Looking at it from above, the island is barely there, just a jagged dot surrounded by white caps and gray clouds. In winter, even that disappears. A smudge in the snowstorm, a blink on the screen, and yet that's what makes it beautiful. Not the ice, not the birds, not the science. The mystery. The fact that this island exists at all. That out in the far South Atlantic, beyond shipping lanes and search engines, there's a frozen fortress where nothing stays and nothing explains itself. Bouvet doesn't care if you know it. But now you do. And it will live in your mind like that lifeboat, perfectly intact with no clear reason why. You leave the wind and fog of Bouvet behind, blinking as the world tilts out of the ice and into the iron grip of secrecy. No crashing waves here. No penguins or lifeboats or moss creeping across a forgotten cliff. Just concrete corridors and curtains pulled tightly shut. You're in Pyongyang now, and you're not welcome. In the heart of North Korea's capital city, tucked behind nondescript buildings, past the gaze of every camera and tour group, lies a room no ordinary citizen has ever seen. A room that isn't supposed to exist. A room known only by a number, whispered in intelligence reports and defectors' accounts, Room 39. This place isn't a ruin. It isn't buried under centuries of dust. It's modern, operational, and disturbingly quiet. Room 39 hums not with lights or footsteps, but with the quiet rustle of money-changing hands in the dark. What it is, officially, depends on who you ask. The North Korean government, of course, denies that it exists. But international intelligence agencies, former insiders, and economic analysts tell a different story. Room 39 is real, and it's believed to be the nerve center of North Korea's shadow economy, a vast underground machine dedicated to funneling foreign currency into the hands of the regime. Not for the people, not for roads or power grids or medicine, for control, for survival. Historians still debate whether Room 39 originated in the 1970s as a simple trade department or something darker right from the start. Either way, by now, it has grown into a hidden empire. According to reports from defectors, Room 39 oversees more than 100 front companies across the globe, restaurants in Southeast Asia, fishing operations in Africa, hotels in Europe, all of them seemingly harmless ordinary. But behind the curtain, profits are quietly routed back to Pyongyang into secret accounts, off-the-books military programs, and the private vaults of the ruling Kim dynasty. It's like an international bank robbery played in slow motion, not through guns and masks, but contracts, counterfeit bills, and diplomatic immunity. What's chilling is how invisible it all is. You could walk past the building that houses Room 39 and never know it. You could dine in one of its shell companies and never realize who's collecting your credit card charge. You could meet someone who works for the organization and never catch a hint of what they really do. There are no logos, no slogans, no Ministry of Secret Profits on the door, just a room and a lot of shadows. Some of its operations are surprisingly low-tech. North Korean workers are reportedly sent overseas chefs, construction crews, garment makers, and made to send nearly all their earnings back to the regime. Others are far more advanced. In 2005, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned Banco Delta Asia, a Macau-based bank, for laundering money on behalf of Room 39. Since then, investigations have traced everything from counterfeit Viagra to luxury watches to pirated software products designed not just for profit, but for invisibility. Then there's the cyber side. That's the part that makes your hair stand up. In recent years, Room 39 or its affiliated agencies have turned increasingly to digital heists. Cryptocurrency thefts, ransomware attacks, the infamous WannaCry virus that swept across global systems in 2017 linked to North Korean hackers. Banks from Bangladesh to Chile have found themselves cleaned out overnight funds rerouted through layers of false identities and ghost accounts. It's a modern twist on an ancient motive: keep the leadership rich and the lights on, at least in the palace. And what is the money used for? Not schools, not hospitals. Reports suggest it's poured into nuclear weapons programs, long-range missile development, lavish imported goods for the elite, and even the upkeep of the palatial homes that dot the North Korean countryside, homes the public will never see. Room 39 isn't some rogue entity. It doesn't operate like a cartel or a gang. It reports directly, according to most analysts, to Kim Jong-un himself. Some have called it his personal slush fund. Others see it as a financial ministry with no laws, no ethics, and no audits. Just targets. Quiet ones. There are no verified photographs from inside Room 39. No floor plans. No whistleblower expose. Just fragments, names leaked in testimony, operations disrupted by international sting efforts, and a reputation so strong it doesn't need confirmation. Even defectors tread carefully when speaking about it. Some say it's more powerful than official ministries. Others won't speak of it at all. In North Korea, silence is survival. And yet, for all its secrecy, Room 39 has become something like a dark mirror reflecting not just the mechanics of a hidden government, but how fragile the structures of trust and economy can really be. You think of finance as a web, open, monitored, predictable. Room 39 threads through that web like a ghost. It's not the only shadow network in the world, but it may be the most impenetrable, which brings us to the real fear. It's not just what Room 39 does, it's that it still works. In a world flooded with surveillance tech, satellite imaging, AI-driven banking analytics, and diplomatic scrutiny, this machine has kept grinding forward, adapting, moving, surviving. It's outlived sanctions, scandals, and leadership changes. And it's doing it in plain sight. You start to wonder how many other rooms are out there, not numbered, not named, just humming behind closed doors, with the rest of us none the wiser. And as you drift further into the thought, you realize something strange. The most mysterious places aren't always marked on a map. Some aren't places at all. They're systems. Invisible fortresses built out of paper trails and passwords. Their walls are policies. Their moats are legal gray zones. Their guards are silence. So you leave Room 39 where you found it in the dark. Behind a door you'll never open, in a building you'll never find, in a country you'll never walk through freely. And as you go, you hear the hum again. That soft, invisible buzz of a machine that feeds on secrets and prints power in return. It doesn't need you to believe in it. It already works. Heat. Not the kind you know, the sun on your face, warm beach kind. This heat breathes. It seethes. It pulses from the ground like the earth is boiling over. You're not standing under a summer sky. You're standing at the edge of a living wound where the planet has split open and decided to show you just how unfriendly it can be. Welcome to the Danakil Depression. This place doesn't need fences to keep you out. Nature took care of that. Located in northeastern Ethiopia near the border with Eritrea, the Danakil Depression is one of the hottest, driest, and most hostile environments on Earth. Just saying desert doesn't quite cut it. The temperatures regularly climb above 120 degrees Celsius, 49 degrees Celsius. Rainfall is almost non-existent. In the air, well, let's just say you won't want to breathe too deeply. It smells like sulfur metal and something not quite right. But it's not just the heat that makes this place unforgettable. It's the color. You step forward carefully and the world seems to shift. Pools of water shimmer in green so bright they look radioactive. Mounds of crusty salt glow yellow and orange like spilled turmeric on a dinner plate from hell. And beneath your feet, a surface that looks solid but might not be. You could be standing on a wafer-thin crust with boiling acid just inches below. This isn't science fiction. This is Dalal, the most famous hydrothermal field in the Danakil. It's a place where chemistry loses its mind. The water here can have a pH below 0, not just acidic, but super acidic. The kind of water that can dissolve metal, burn skin, and take the shine off your bravado real fast. And yet here it is, wide open, no fences, no guards, just the understanding. If you mess up, you may not get a second chance. Scientists once thought this place was completely lifeless. After all, it's hard to imagine anything surviving here. No shade, no clean water, pools that bubble with toxic gas. Not exactly Airbnb material. But in recent years, extremophiles, tiny microorganisms that specialize in not dying in places like this, have been discovered clinging to life in the margins, not thriving, not throwing a party, just surviving, barely. Even that's up for debate. Some researchers argue that these organisms may have been carried in from elsewhere and aren't actively growing here. Historians still debate whether this place is truly lifeless or just mostly uninterested in the idea of life at all. The ground hisses underfoot. Fissures vent gases into the air, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, chlorine, enough to make you dizzy, or worse, if you linger too long. One wrong step, and the brittle crust could give way, dropping you into a pool of acid hot enough to do permanent damage before you can even shout for help. And yet people come here. Not many, not often, but they come. The Afar people who've lived in this region for generations know how to read the land. They navigate by instinct, harvesting salt from safer parts of the depression and carving it into thick slabs. These are then loaded onto camels and transported along ancient trade routes. It's brutal, dangerous work done in brutal, dangerous heat. But it has been done this way for centuries. For the Afar, the Danakil isn't just a place, it's a reality. One they've learned to live near, but never fully enter. Tourists sometimes make the trip too drawn by Instagram photos of psychedelic landscapes and stories of otherworldly danger. They're escorted, watched, warned. No touching the pools, no wandering off, and definitely no testing the water. One slip, and you could become a cautionary tale bubbling in a neon green crater. It's not that the Danakil wants to hurt you. It just doesn't care if you make it out. What's perhaps most haunting is how beautiful it all is. The colors, the patterns, the way mineral formations twist like coral reefs made of rust and fire. It looks like a dreamscape, a fever dream maybe, but beautiful nonetheless. You almost forget for a moment that it could kill you without blinking. NASA has taken an interest in the Danakil especially places like Dalal. Why? Because if anything can survive here, it might help us understand what life could look like on other planets. Mars, Europa, places where temperatures and chemistry are wildly inhospitable to most life as we know it. The Danakil is Earth's own alien outpost, a planetary stand-in for the utterly unwelcoming, and yet the silence here is deep. Not peaceful, like a quiet night in the woods, but empty. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like a pause in noise, it feels like the absence of noise altogether. A silence that doesn't expect you, that doesn't accommodate you. The landscape is always changing. Formations that look like sculptures can disappear overnight. Pools can drain or overflow. Steam vents shift. You could visit one year and not recognize the place the next. It's alive not with creatures, but with motion. Boiling, fizzing, cracking. The earth flexing its skin and letting you know who's in charge. And still, there's no real barrier to entry. No military fence. No quarantine order. Just the natural law of enter at your own risk, which somehow feels more honest. Nature doesn't need to ban you from the Danakil. It knows most of you won't make the trip. And if you do, well, good luck. What's truly eerie is how close you can get. One moment, you're on a stable path. The next, you're peering into a pond that looks like lemon lime soda and could dissolve your shoes. There are no signs, no warning lights. Just you, your guide, and your judgment. Sometimes that's not enough. And yet this place calls to us. Maybe it's the danger. Maybe it's the fact that this part of the earth seems so unearth-like. Maybe it's because we want to believe there are still places where we're not the dominant force, where survival isn't guaranteed, where we're reminded gently or not that the earth has zones we don't belong in. The Danakil Depression is not a forbidden place in the way Room 39 is. There's no regime guarding it. No classified data behind reinforced doors. The danger here is raw, pure, environmental. You're not unwelcome. You're just irrelevant. As you turn to leave carefully, slowly watching where each foot falls, you might notice something strange. Your reflection in one of the pools, distorted, blurred, like you're being erased. Not by time, not by memory, but by the land itself. The Danakil doesn't keep souvenirs. At first glance, it doesn't look dangerous. The island rises out of the blue Atlantic, like something out of a travel magazine. Lush green trees, sunlight glinting off the canopy waves, lapping against the rocks. There are no storm clouds, no smoke, no obvious warning signs. Just a quiet hill floating off the southeastern coast of Brazil. But that calm, it's a lie. Because if you step ashore, here chances are you won't step back off. Welcome to Ilha da Queimada Grande, better known as Snake Island. This place is not for you. Let's get the facts out of the way. This 106-acre island is home to one of the most venomous snakes on the planet, the golden lancehead viper. And not just a few of them. In some parts of the island, there's estimated to be one snake per square meter. That's not a metaphor. That's not exaggeration. That's one snake for every step you take. In the trees, in the rocks, in the underbrush, on the branches, maybe watching you now. Snake Island is so dangerous, so saturated with venomous life, that the Brazilian government has outlawed casual visits entirely. Only approved researchers under strict supervision and often accompanied by military personnel are allowed to land there. The rest of us, we're better off staying on the boat, or better yet, on the mainland. The golden lancehead viper, Bothrops insularis, is a marvel of evolution. Isolated on the island for thousands of years after rising sea levels cut it off from the mainland, this particular species adapted fast. With no mammals to hunt, the snakes learned to strike birds, particularly migratory species that stopped to rest. Their venom evolved into something brutally efficient, up to 5 times more potent than their mainland relatives. Fast-acting, tissue-melting, a perfect tool for killing prey before it can flap its wings and fly away. Historians still debate whether the snakes ever had predators here or whether this ecosystem has always been unbalanced, tilted heavily in favor of the cold-blooded. Either way, the result is clear. This is their island now, and the few stories of people trying to live here, well, those don't end well. There's one tale, often repeated, of a lighthouse keeper and his family who once manned the island in the early 20th century. According to legend, they were attacked and the night snakes, slipping through cracks in the walls, sliding in through windows, even dropping from the roof. None of them made it off. Official records are scarce, and it's likely some details have been embellished over time. But it's true that the lighthouse was eventually automated, and no one's lived there since. The forest is dense and deceiving. From the water, it looks like a tropical paradise. But the moment you push into the trees, it changes. Every rustle becomes a red flag. Every branch could be more than it seems. The golden lanceheads are ambush predators. They don't chase. They wait. They hang motionless, coiled, or draped until the moment is right, and then they strike. There's no hospital on Snake Island, no emergency service, no antidote on hand. If you get bitten, your chances of survival depend on 2 things: how fast you can get back to the mainland and whether anyone's willing to come get you. Spoiler alert, they probably aren't. And here's the strangest part. These snakes, these deadly beautiful, completely terrifying creatures, are endangered. That's right. They exist nowhere else on Earth. Snake Island is their only home. And the very venom that makes them so feared, it's also incredibly valuable. Researchers extract it to study for potential medical uses, treatments for heart disease, blood pressure, even cancer. So here's the dilemma. The only way to preserve this species is to keep people away, which means the best thing we can do for both snakes and science is to leave the island alone. Conservationists walk a fine line. They study the snakes in short bursts with maximum caution. No overnights, no wandering, just targeted research population monitoring and carefully regulated venom collection. The island is monitored, but not actively guarded. The isolation is its own security system. Not many poachers are willing to risk death for a backpack full of reptiles. The snakes themselves are elusive. Despite their numbers, most sightings are brief flashes of tan and gold among the leaves, quick slithers into shadows. They don't pose. They don't attack without cause. They simply live. This is their world, and we are not part of it. It's rare in our modern world to find a place so thoroughly avoided by humans. Not because of war or poison or some man-made disaster, just because nature won. And maybe that's what makes Snake Island so compelling. It's not a lost city or a buried bunker. It's not protected by secret codes or government red tape. It's protected by fangs, by instinct, by a few million years of quiet evolution. You can look at photos. You can trace the outline on a map. But the only way to truly understand Snake Island is to stand on that rocky shore, feel the sweat on your back, and realize every shadow might be watching. Every breeze through the grass might be something more. Even researchers talk about the strange tension, the sense that the island is aware, that it's not just a location, but a presence. One you step into cautiously, and one you leave quickly, because Snake Island doesn't welcome. It tolerates for a moment, and that in its own way is more unsettling than a red "Do Not Enter" sign. What's even more curious is how close the island is to civilization. Just a short distance from Sao Paulo, one of the largest cities in the world. People fly overhead every day. Ships pass by. The island is visible from shore on a clear day. It's right there, so close you could almost swim to it. But you won't, because some places don't need legends, or ruins, or ghost stories. Some places just are. And they tell you, with every hiss of wind through the grass, every unseen pair of eyes in the canopy, not here. You don't belong here, and that's okay. Because the world still needs wild places. Places where humans don't have dominion. Where nature is sharp-coiled and unconcerned with your curiosity. Snake Island is one of those rare locations that reminds us we are not always the top of the food chain. And sometimes, the best decision you can make is to stay away. So you turn your boat gently from the shore. You watch the green fade into gray, and somewhere in the trees something golden flickers, but it doesn't follow. It doesn't need to. You're not entirely sure when it got cold. 1 minute you were watching snakes slither under the Brazilian sun, and now there's nothing but wind and snow, and a sky that feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders. The world around you has gone silent again, but not peacefully so. This silence is heavier, denser. The kind of hush that comes not from quiet, but from isolation. You're standing on Saunders Island now, part of the South Sandwich Archipelago in the icy Southern Ocean. Technically, this is British territory. Realistically, it's the kind of place Britain probably doesn't visit unless it really has to. There are no towns here, no airstrips, no ferries or tours. Just rock ice and one sleeping monster. Mount Michael. From a distance, it looks like just another snow-covered peak. The kind of frozen landscape you might see in the corner of a Penguin documentary. But inside that mountain, beneath the crust under layers of glacier and ash, something burns. A lava lake. Rare, violent, and almost completely hidden from the world. Most people don't even realize these things exist outside of action movies. But lava lakes are real. They're pools of molten rock that simmer, not erupt. Constantly active, but usually unseen. There are only a handful on Earth: Hawaii, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia. And then there's Mount Michael, quietly bubbling away in one of the most inaccessible places on the planet. For years, scientists suspected something unusual was happening here. Satellite data showed thermal readings that didn't make sense, glimpses of heat from within a snowbound peak. But no one had ever seen the lake directly. No one had climbed the volcano, peered over the edge, and come back with a selfie. And honestly, they still haven't. Mount Michael doesn't make it easy. The weather here is brutal. Winds howl at hurricane force. Fog rolls in and out without warning. The snow hides deep crevasses in the rock, and the ice is slick with volcanic soot. Even standing on the island is a logistical nightmare. Ships can't dock. Helicopters can't land. Everything, the people, the gear, the hope has to come ashore in inflatable boats, bouncing against jagged coastlines. Historians still debate whether any human being has stood at the summit and looked directly into that lava lake. The 2019 confirmation that the lake exists came not from an expedition, but from satellites. Machines in orbit, peering through clouds to catch faint glows of heat processed into grainy images of fire beneath the frost. Even the best technology could only guess at the lake's size somewhere between 100 and 200 meters wide, big enough to boil your imagination. And that's part of what makes Mount Michael so compelling. It's not just remote, it's secretive. There are no glossy photos, no drone footage sweeping over molten waves. Just pixels and speculation, a flicker on a thermal scan, a rumor carved into stone and steam. The volcano itself is active, but not explosively so. It breathes in a low, quiet rhythm, occasional ash clouds, minor tremors, a faint plume rising from the crater on the clearest days. But the lava lake, that just stays, burns, waits. Geologists believe that maintaining a lava lake requires a delicate balance of pressure gas and heat. Too much of any one ingredient, and the whole thing collapses or erupts. But Mount Michael, it's been holding that balance for what could be decades, maybe longer. A perfect smoldering stalemate between creation and destruction. You'd think that would be enough to draw researchers in droves. But getting to Mount Michael is like trying to reach the moon without the benefit of rockets or billionaires. There's no research station here, no permanent crew, no casual visits. Just short, high-risk scientific missions with more equipment than guarantees. There are penguins on the lower slopes. They huddle in small groups indifferent to the volcanic rumbles beneath their feet. A few seabirds pass overhead, and then it's just white, ice, rock, smoke, the sound of your breath against your scarf, the distant hiss of something deep and unseeable. And that's what makes this place stick in your memory. You've heard of dangerous places. Places that scream their menace. Acid pools that burn. Islands crawling with venom. Bunkers sealed with steel. But Mount Michael doesn't scream. It whispers. It simmers. It hides. It's the kind of place that doesn't need a legend. The facts are enough. There's a lava lake under the ice. No one's ever seen it in person. No one's sure what it looks like. It just is. Imagine that. In the 21st century, after drone satellites, Google Earth, and global positioning, we still don't know what it really looks like. A pool of fire spinning in the heart of a glacier, invisible from every human angle. Some say that's the future of exploration, not climbing peaks or planting flags, but decoding shadows, reading heat maps, finding the places that don't care whether you ever arrive. Mount Michael doesn't ask for climbers. It doesn't tempt tourists. It just sits in the Southern Ocean, humming its molten song beneath a shroud of snow. And that's kind of beautiful, isn't it? A volcano with a secret heart, a fire that no one watches. You could argue it's the most honest place on Earth. No selfies, no signs, no souvenirs, just raw elemental existence. A contradiction wrapped in fog, burning lava inside a world of ice. Somewhere in that contradiction is the point that maybe we don't need to understand everything. That maybe some places are more powerful because they remain just out of reach. Mount Michael doesn't give you answers, it gives you distance. And in a world filled with noise, maybe that's exactly what you need. So you turn your back to the wind, take one last look at the glacier-shrouded peak, and feel the ground vibrate just a little. just enough to remind you it's there. It always will be. Waiting, the wind shifts again. This time, it's not ice that stings your face, but the sting of memory. Salt hangs in the air, not from ocean spray, but from history. You've left the volcanoes and vipers behind. Now the world quiets for a different reason. Not because it's remote or wild, but because something terrible happened here. So many terrible things, in fact, that even the birds seem reluctant to sing. You're drifting toward the Venetian lagoon now. Just a short boat ride from one of the world's most romantic cities. Gondolas, art candlelight, and gelato. Venice shimmers in the distance, golden and bustling. But we're not stopping there. We're heading for the little patch of land that no one talks about. The one not listed on the tours. The one the locals refer to with lowered voices. This is Poveglia Island, and it does not want to be remembered. From a distance, it looks harmless enough. Overgrown trees, crumbling buildings, an old bell tower silhouetted against the sky. But the silence is immediate, thick. The kind of silence that swells in your chest and makes you second-guess every step. Poveglia doesn't scream. It doesn't even whisper. It just watches. Its story, if you can call it one story, is really many layered on top of each other. Each one soaked with fear, abandonment, and sorrow. The kind that never quite leaves. It began as a refuge. In Roman times, Poveglia served as a shelter for people fleeing invading armies, a place of escape. But over the centuries, its role would change, and change again, each time for the worse. By the 14th century, as the Black Death swept across Europe, Venice, pragmatic and terrified, needed a solution. Their trade brought riches, but also disease. So they turned to the lagoon. Ships suspected of carrying plague were anchored near Poveglia. Passengers and crew offloaded, left to wait 40 days, 40 giorni. That's where we get the word quarantine. Some survived, many didn't. As the plagues returned in waves, the island's role expanded. It wasn't just a waiting room anymore. It became a dumping ground. Entire boatloads of sick were brought here to die. Corpses were thrown into mass graves, burned in great heaps when the pits overflowed. The soil, it's said, is now part ash, part bone. Historians still debate just how many were buried here. Tens of thousands, hundreds. The number doesn't matter really. The weight does. The knowledge that beneath every vine, every stone lie people who didn't choose to come here, who were brought because they were feared, because they were sick, because society decided they were better off forgotten. And then it got worse. In the 1920s, long after the flames of plague had cooled, the island was repurposed again. This time as a psychiatric hospital. Isolated, out of sight. The perfect place, officials said, for patients to receive treatment. But mental illness wasn't well understood then. And treatment was a word that could mean many things. Electroshock, ice baths, isolation, restraints, rumors of lobotomies performed without consent, of experiments carried out in secret, of a head doctor who, according to whispered legend, eventually lost his mind and flung himself from the bell tower, driven mad by the screams only he could hear. It's hard to separate truth from ghost story now. The records are sparse. The building is abandoned, but the atmosphere, that's intact. Walking through the ruins of the hospital, if you ever got the chance, which you probably won't, you'd find rusted bed frames, collapsed ceilings, and wind whispering through broken windows. Patient files still lie scattered on the floor. names, dates, symptoms, all slowly being eaten by mildew and time. It's not dramatic. There are no jump scares, just decay and silence, and the nagging sense that the building is still holding on to something. The Italian government officially closed the hospital in 1968. Since then, the island has remained empty, not repurposed, not renovated, not sold off to developers or turned into a boutique resort. No one wants it, and even if they did, something always seems to get in the way. Funding falls through, permissions disappear, nature reclaims what's hers. Local legend says no birds nest on Poveglia, that the island rejects them, that if you step ashore, you'll hear footsteps that aren't yours, that the bell tower still rings, though the bell itself was removed decades ago. Do people believe all that? Maybe not. But ask a Venetian if they'd spend the night there. Almost all will say no, because some places, even without monsters or curses, just feel wrong. Poveglia is not trying to scare you. It's not performing. It's just saturated with sorrow, with abandonment, with a history that can't be scrubbed clean or paved over. No one is marketing haunted tours. No one is putting up plaques or museum labels. The island simply sits there less than a mile from the lights of Venice, untouched and slowly being erased by ivy. And maybe that's the most haunting thing of all. Not what happened, but how close it still is. How easily it could be seen if only we looked. You could be sipping coffee on the mainland, unaware that across the water lies a place layered in tragedy. A place where the past wasn't buried. It was simply left. And as you drift away from the island, back toward the clatter and life of the city, it lingers in your mind. That tower, that silence, the weight of all that went unsaid and all that still hangs in the air. Some places are forbidden by law, others by fear. Poveglia by memory, and memory is a hard thing to shake. Now, the air thickens. Not with fog or steam, but with the kind of moisture that clings to your skin and fills your lungs with every breath. You've traded ghostly islands and volcanic peaks for something wilder, greener. But don't mistake that for safety. Ahead of you is a place where maps blur into guesswork, where roads dissolve into tangled vines, and where even satellites squint. You've entered the Amazon, but not the part people visit. Not the rainforest with eco-lodges and wildlife tours. No, you're heading west, toward the Javari Valley. This is one of the last true frontiers on Earth. Tucked along the border between Brazil and Peru, the Javari Valley is a region the size of Austria, over 85,000 square kilometers of dense pulsing rainforest. But it's not the size that unsettles you. It's what, or more precisely, who lives there. Or rather, who chooses not to be seen. The Javari Valley is home to the largest concentration of uncontacted tribes anywhere in the world. Dozens of groups, each with their own language traditions and internal rhythms. Most have never had peaceful contact with the outside world. Some have had no contact at all. You may not believe they exist. You may think, surely, in this modern age, no one could be living out here without Wi-Fi or traffic or TikTok. But they do. We've seen the traces. Narrow footpaths cut through the undergrowth. Small circular clearings. Thatched huts. Brief grainy videos shot from planes. Faces tilted skyward, arms raised, some waving, some aiming bows. They are not ghosts. They are not myths. They are people. Real. Present. And choosing to remain apart. The Brazilian government recognizes this. Unusually, and perhaps admirably, they've created strict protections around the region. The Javari Valley Indigenous Territory is not open for tourism. You can't wander in with a machete and a GoPro. You need clearance. And even then, most of the land is completely off limits, not to keep you safe, but to keep them safe. Because they've never asked for our contact. And because something as simple as the common flu could be catastrophic to a community that's never encountered it before. Historians still debate how long these groups have remained uncontacted. Centuries, at least. Possibly longer. Some are believed to be remnants of older tribes that fled deeper into the forest to escape colonial violence. Others may be entirely distinct, holding languages and customs we've never documented. And may never. Satellite imaging can only see so much. The forest is dense. The canopy stretches like a living ceiling, stitched so tightly together that even high-tech sensors struggle to penetrate it. Beneath that green roof, life moves to its own drumbeat. Slow, hidden, intentional. Occasionally, stories emerge from neighboring tribes, those who've had contact and lived to tell about it. They speak of spiritual rules that forbid outsiders, of ancestors who vanished into the jungle to escape violence or disease, of people who speak languages no one else understands, who wear no modern clothing, and who live not in ignorance of the world, but in defiance of it. What's more, the deeper you go, the more unknowable the land becomes. The terrain shifts like it's breathing. Rivers bend without warning. Mountains rise out of flatness. Some areas have never been scientifically surveyed, and that's not hyperbole. There are valleys in the Javari that have likely never seen a GPS signal, never hosted a research station, never heard a helicopter. That's not to say no one's tried. Illegal loggers have found their way in. So have gold miners, drug traffickers, and poachers. The edges of the Javari are contested territory, a lawless overlap between environmental sanctuaries, smuggling routes, and greed. In 2022, journalist Dom Phillips and indigenous expert Bruno Pereira were murdered here while investigating illegal activity in the region. Their deaths sent shockwaves through the global community, a brutal reminder that even in the name of justice, the jungle does not forgive easily, and yet for all the danger, the valley endures. Vast stretches remain untouched. It's one of the few places on Earth where human history continues in parallel, not as part of the global narrative, but as its own quiet separate thread. Linguists believe that some of the languages spoken here may be completely unique, not related to any known family. No shared root words, no written records, just oral tradition passed down from one generation to the next, like embers kept alive through voice alone. Imagine that. Entire worldviews, cosmologies, mythologies, existing right now under trees you've never seen spoken in syllables that have never been written, and probably never will. It's humbling, isn't it? We think of the world as fully charted, explored, named and owned and regulated. But the Javari says no. The Javari reminds us that our systems aren't universal, that our language isn't default, that our way of life isn't inevitable. There's something sacred about that. Even the forest seems to agree. It grows thick and unruly here, like it's been instructed to protect, to conceal. The air is heavy, not oppressive, but intimate. It folds around you like a secret. Every bird call, every rustle of leaf or crack of branch feels meaningful, intentional, as if the land is watching to see what you'll do. But this isn't your place to explore. And that's the strange beauty of the Javari Valley. It isn't forbidden in the dramatic way. There are no ancient curses, no venomous traps, no glowing red signs. It's forbidden in the quiet way, the respectful way, the way that says, this space is not for you. You're allowed to know it exists, but you're not allowed to have it. Maybe that's the rarest thing of all. As the modern world expands with cities swallowing forests and data towers piercing clouds, the Javari Valley stands its ground. Not out of defiance, but out of continuity. Life here doesn't want to be saved or changed or interpreted. It just wants to be left alone. And maybe we should let it, because some mysteries aren't puzzles to be solved. Some are mirrors reminding us of the vastness we haven't earned. So you step back your feet on the edge of something older than maps. You breathe in the green silence, and you listen not for voices, but for the quiet. You leave the tangled vines of the Javari behind, stepping out of the heat and humidity and into a cold that doesn't come from the air, it comes from below. A chill that sinks into your bones, not because of wind or ice, but because of something much stranger. You're not climbing mountains now. You're going the opposite direction, straight down, into the earth. You're standing on the Kola Peninsula in northwestern Russia. It's a bleak, rocky landscape beyond the Arctic Circle. There's not much to see, just tundra, snow-dusted hills, and the occasional rusted ruin of old Soviet ambition. But beneath your feet lies one of the strangest, most unsettling human-made places on Earth. The Kola Super Deep Borehole. Doesn't sound too dramatic, right? Just a borehole, a drill site, a scientific curiosity. But then you hear how deep it goes. More than 12 kilometers. Over 40,000 feet. That's deeper than the Mariana Trench. Deeper than any mine or oil rig. Deeper than any human has ever dug before or since. And what makes it truly bizarre is that you'd never know it was there. At the surface, the borehole looks like nothing, just a round, rusted metal cap bolted into the rock. No monument, no warning sign, no glory. The structure that once housed it has mostly collapsed. The buildings are empty. The access tower was torn down years ago. And yet beneath that little hatch, the earth opens up. A spiral of metal and mystery reaching farther into the crust than any drill had ever dared. It began in 1970 during the Cold War. A Soviet scientific project meant to compete with an earlier American attempt, Project Mohole, which had aimed to drill through the ocean floor to reach the mantle. The Americans never got far. The Soviets, however, persisted. They weren't digging for oil, or gold, or military advantage. They were digging for knowledge. What's under us? They asked. Not just a few feet down, but really down. What's the earth made of? How does the crust behave at depth? Can we reach the mantle? Can we understand the planet, not from above, but from inside? For nearly 2 decades, the drill kept going. Through granite and basalt, through ancient metamorphic rock, layer after layer of stone, older than language, older than bones. And then the unexpected started piling up. At around 7 kilometers, the team discovered rocks that were over 2.7 billion years old. At 9 kilometers, they found fossilized plankton, tiny single-celled organisms trapped in rock that should have been far too deep, far too pressurized, and far too hot for fossils to exist. And yet there they were, perfectly preserved. Historians still debate how they got there. Were they pushed down by tectonic movement? Did ancient oceans once flow, where there's now only stone? No one has a definitive answer. But it was the heat that truly stopped the project. As the drill reached deeper, the temperature began to rise much faster than expected. By the time they passed 12 kilometers, the rock temperature had climbed to over 180 degrees. That's about 356 degrees though. Far hotter than models had predicted. Too hot for the drill bits to survive. Too hot for the equipment to function reliably. The ground itself had turned hostile. The deeper they went, the more the rock behaved like plastic bending, shifting, pushing back. They couldn't drill anymore, not with the tools they had. So in 1992, they stopped, and that was that. But not quite, because as the years passed and the Cold War ended, the borehole took on a different life. The data it had collected on seismic waves, on heat transfer, on mineral composition was groundbreaking. But people didn't talk about the science. They talked about the stories. That's where the rumors began. Whispers of strange sounds recorded from deep below, moans, voices, screams. A tabloid hoax in the 1980s claimed the Soviets had drilled into a literal pit of hell, that the earth had opened and the damned were calling out. It wasn't true. But people believed it. Maybe because there was something unnerving about the idea of digging so deep into the planet and being forced to stop. Not by demons, but by the earth itself. Even today, if you visit the site, and yes, it's still there, you'll find the cap sealed tight, the area abandoned. Snow collects around the rusting remnants of machinery. The wind howls across the plain, and the hole stays shut. You can't hear anything, but you'll feel something. The knowledge that 12 kilometers down lies a place no one has seen, a depth no one has touched. That we dug, and finally, the earth said no. There's something humbling about that. We've been to the moon. We've sent probes to Mars. We map galaxies and peer into black holes. But beneath our feet, we've barely scratched the surface. The Earth's crust is between 30 to 50 kilometers thick. The Kola borehole didn't even make it halfway through. The mantle, the layer beneath the crust, remains untouched, unseen. The outer core, forget it. The inner core, that might as well be fantasy. The truth is, we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the inside of our own planet. And the Kola super deep borehole, it stands as a monument to that mystery, not because it was completed, but because it wasn't. It's easy to think that everything is within our reach, that with enough tech, enough money, enough time, we can know everything. But this little hatch in the frozen Russian north tells a different story. Some knowledge resists. Some places are not guarded by walls or secrets. They're guarded by pressure, heat, silence. As you walk away from the site, your breath fogging in the cold, you might be tempted to laugh at the rumors, the haunted sounds, the ghost stories. But the real story, that's stranger and somehow more unsettling. We built machines to drill into the earth. We went as far as we could, and then we had to stop. Not because of failure, but because the earth said not yet. Now let's go somewhere that looks like it doesn't even belong on earth at all. No cities, no trees, no footsteps. Just endless rock wind and silence so thick it feels like time itself gave up and wandered off. You're now standing on Devon Island in the Canadian Arctic, the largest uninhabited island on Earth. And if you didn't know better, you might think you'd stepped off the planet entirely. In fact, that's the whole point. Devon Island is what scientists call a Mars analog, a place that's so harsh, so stripped of life, so cold and remote, that it's one of the closest natural environments we have to what astronauts might experience on the Red Planet. And unlike a lot of simulations, this one wasn't built in a lab. It's been here waiting since long before humans were even an idea. To call Devon inhospitable doesn't quite do it justice. Temperatures often plunge below 30 degrees in winter. The ground is locked in permafrost almost year-round. The summer is short cold and stingy with sunlight. There are no trees, no grasses, barely any animal life, just wind-scrubbed stone, and the occasional stubborn patch of moss clinging to the north-facing rocks. And yet, this place has become a stand-in for another world. That's why every summer, a small group of researchers from NASA and other agencies land here by chartered aircraft, of course, because there's no airport, no roads, no boat service. They set up camp near the island's most famous feature, the Houghton Crater. Roughly 20 million years ago, a meteor smashed into this part of what is now Nunavut, carving out a crater about 12 miles wide. It left behind fractured rock-shattered layers of soil and a landscape that looks eerily like satellite photos of Mars. Red-gray rock, deep erosion lines, strange formations left behind by ancient impacts and glacial movement. When you look around, you don't feel like you're on another continent. You feel like you're on another planet. That's what makes Devon Island so uniquely valuable. Scientists can simulate what it might be like to live and work on Mars by doing it here first. They test rovers, spacesuits, instruments. They study geology in a Mars-like environment. They simulate isolation group dynamics and even emergency response. Because if something goes wrong out here, there is no quick help. Historians still debate whether earlier cultures ever settled on the island. There's little evidence of permanent indigenous habitation. The Dorset and Thule peoples passed through the greater Arctic region, for centuries skilled nomads with the knowledge to survive harsh conditions, but even they seem to avoid Devon for long-term stays. The climate is just too unforgiving, even for the Arctic, and maybe that's what gives the island its eerie pull. There are no ruins, no myths, no fences or warning signs, just the raw, physical reminder that some parts of Earth never bothered with us. Some places didn't care whether they were seen or named. Devon Island exists entirely on its own terms. The isolation is total. When research teams leave, they take everything with them because there's no one to clean up after them, no infrastructure to support lingering. The snow comes and smooths over the footprints. The wind erases the tire marks, and the island returns to what it was before, empty, but not quite lifeless. There are musk oxen here, a few Arctic foxes, some birds that pass through on their migration north, but it's sparse and silent. The kind of silence you don't even know exists until you hear it. Not just the absence of people, but the absence of evidence that people were ever meant to be here. You could walk for miles and never see another living creature. You could spend an hour standing still and hear nothing but your own heartbeat and the rasp of wind against stone. And then there's the geology. Devon Island is a treasure chest for paleontologists. The exposed rock layers and untouched terrain provide a look into Earth's distant past. Fossils, ancient sediments, glacial scars, all preserved in a deep freeze of natural time. It's a place where the Earth remembers and doesn't mind showing you if you're patient. For climate scientists too, the island is priceless. Its changing permafrost patterns help model global climate trends. Its ancient ice holds data on Earth's past atmosphere locked away like a frozen library. But it's a quiet science, no dramatic excavations, no cable news coverage, just slow, steady work in the cold. And while you're here, you can't help but feel small. This isn't like other remote places. It's not dangerous in the way the Donakill is. It's not deadly by design like Snake Island. It just doesn't care if you're here or not. That might be the most unnerving part. You could build a shelter. You could light a fire. You could put your flag in the ground and declare it home, but the island would ignore you. It's not hostile, just indifferent. The cold isn't trying to kill you. It just doesn't notice you. And when you leave, it won't remember. There are stories, of course. There always are. Tales of strange lights seen from orbit, of unusual electromagnetic readings. Some say military satellites have long paid special attention to Devon Island. But there's no proof. Just rumors and radio static crackling across the snow. More likely, the mystery here isn't hidden. It's in plain sight. Devon Island doesn't pretend to be anything. It's rock and ice and silence. And yet, that simplicity unsettles us. Because in a world of curated images and constant sound, here is a place where nothing performs. Nothing asks to be noticed. You're free to leave your footprints, but you'll also watch them vanish. This island teaches you something if you're listening, that not every frontier is meant to be crossed. That exploration isn't always about conquest, but about perspective, humility, the realization that some landscapes don't resist because they're dangerous. They resist because they simply exist beyond our need for purpose. So you leave Devon Island behind, wrapped in cold, holding its silence like a secret. And as the plane lifts off from its short frozen runway, you look down one last time. No flags, no roads, no goodbyes. Just a ripple of rock and ice stretching out forever, and the distant thought, maybe this is what it's like to visit Mars. But colder, back from the Martian quiet of Devon Island, you find yourself heading south again, not to the tropics, not to the jungle, but to something far more carefully hidden. You're no longer in a place untouched by humanity. Now you're stepping into one built precisely for humanity, though not for most of us. This time, the danger isn't wild snakes or scalding acid. It's us. Or more precisely, what we fear might happen to us. Welcome to Mount Weather, nestled in the forested ridges of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, just 70 miles from Washington, D.C. Mount Weather is one of the most secretive emergency government facilities in the United States. You could drive past it and never know. Trees, fences a few innocuous buildings. Nothing screams end-of-the-world prep site. But beneath that unassuming surface lies something much bigger, much deeper. A literal underground city designed for the collapse of everything. Sounds dramatic, it's supposed to be. Mount Weather isn't a Cold War myth. It's not a conspiracy theory or a coded page in a spy novel. It's real, it exists, and it's active. Its official name is the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. It's run by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And its job in the simplest terms is continuity of government. If the worst happens, nuclear war, massive terrorist attack, catastrophic natural disaster, this is where the top brass goes. Presidents, senators, generals, agency heads, the people who need to stay alive when everything else is falling apart. You don't go there. You don't even ask about it. If you're important enough, you're told where to go in a sealed envelope during your orientation. If you're not well, you'll be watching the mushroom cloud from the outside. Mount Weather began during the Cold War. The 1950s were an age of duck-and-cover drills, fallout shelters, and the sobering realization that we had the power to end civilization, and that someone somewhere needed a backup plan. So the US government began building hardened bunkers across the country. Some were decoys. Some were outdated before they were finished. But a few remained. Mount Weather is one of those few. The public got its first real glimpse into the site in 1974 after a plane crash on nearby terrain prompted a brief burst of media attention. A handful of investigative reporters started asking questions and found references to a secret underground facility complete with roads, power plants, medical clinics, and living quarters. A literal city built into the mountain. Historians still debate how big the complex actually is. Estimates vary. Some say it could house hundreds. Others say thousands. There are supposedly conference rooms, radio towers, even a broadcast studio capable of overriding national media in an emergency. It's believed to be connected to other federal bunkers through secure communication systems and maybe even tunnels. But beyond that, not much is confirmed. That's the point. Mount Weather is protected not just by guards and fences, but by policy. Information is compartmentalized. Access is need to know. You won't find floor plans or official photos. And no, there's no Google Street View tour. That ambiguity, that deliberate absence, is what makes it so chilling. Because unlike ancient ruins or remote islands, this place is designed not to be discovered, not to be studied, not to be remembered. It's meant to be there quietly for when the unthinkable happens. And that raises some uncomfortable questions. Who gets in? How are those decisions made? If society collapses and the doors seal shut, who's left on the outside? We don't know. And the truth is, we're not meant to. The facility was reportedly activated during the September 11th attacks. Not fully occupied, but prepared. It's not some dusty relic from a bygone era. It still functions. It's still funded. And it still sits in the background of disaster scenarios, a shadow option never acknowledged, always ready. It's not just Mount Weather, of course. It's part of a larger network of continuity of government bunkers. There's Raven Rock in Pennsylvania, Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, sites so deep, so fortified that they could survive direct strikes. But Mount Weather is special. It's close, tucked quietly in the woods just a short drive from the seat of American power. And if you're not on the list, too bad. The eerie part is that you can almost see it. Not the underground levels, of course, but the surface buildings. They're visible on satellite maps. Plain white rectangles nestled in greenery. There's even a road leading up to a checkpoint. But beyond that checkpoint, you vanish. Not literally, of course, but in terms of knowledge, of access, of belonging. Mount Weather isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by the future, by what might happen, by what someone already planned for. It's not there because we expect the world to end. It's there because we're afraid it might. And fear, as always, builds strange monuments. You won't find plaques here. No educational signs. No tourists snapping photos next to barbed wire. Just silence. Steady maintenance. Rumors and redacted documents. There's a certain dystopian comfort in knowing it exists. Like a fire extinguisher you hope you'll never use. But there's also something deeply unsettling. Because Mount Weather doesn't save everyone. Just the chosen few. It's a lifeboat, and lifeboats by design have limited seats. The more you think about it, the colder it feels. In a way, it's the opposite of the chaos we've seen in places like the Danakil or Snake Island. This isn't nature rejecting us. It's humanity selecting itself, carefully, quietly. The idea of a bunker like Mount Weather forces you to reckon with what we value in a crisis. Order, control, hierarchy, and the strange belief that when the dust settles, someone should be there to press reset. But at what cost? You step away from the fence, back into the trees. The wind moves through the leaves like a whisper, but you can't help imagining the hum beneath the ground, the generators, the ventilation systems, the quiet buzz of life preparing for catastrophe. It's not a ruin. It's not a relic. It's a question, and it's still waiting for its answer. You're still in the realm of human-made structures, but now you're leaving the polished underground corridors of Mount Weather for a very different kind of ruin. Not sleek, not secure, not secret. This place doesn't hum with silent readiness. It crumbles. It decays. It whispers in the wind. You're not looking at the future anymore. You're standing in the hollowed-out chest of the past. This is Hashima Island. Locals call it Gunkanjima Battleship Island because from a distance, it looks like a warship cutting through the sea. But up close, it's something else entirely. A city made of concrete, deserted, collapsing, and entirely surrounded by water. Located just off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, Hashima was once one of the most densely populated places on Earth. At its peak in the 1950s, over 5,000 people lived on this tiny scrap of rock, which measures less than a third of a square mile. That's tighter than Manhattan, tighter than Hong Kong. Imagine a community squeezed into a cluster of high-rise apartment blocks, walkways, school shops, and shrines, all on a seawall barely holding back the waves. But it wasn't tourism or luxury that brought people here. It was coal. In the late 1800s, the Mitsubishi Corporation discovered undersea coal seams beneath Hashima. They built vertical shafts and began mining deep below the seabed. And to power the operation, they constructed the island, expanding the rock building, the infrastructure, and importing labor. Work was hard. Days were long, but Hashima thrived. There were bakeries, bathhouses, a movie theater, even a rooftop garden. Life bloomed in this dense, self-contained world, surrounded by nothing but ocean and sky. But there was another side to it, a darker layer built into the very foundations. During World War II, as the Japanese Empire expanded and labor shortages grew, Mitsubishi began using forced labor on the island. Korean and Chinese prisoners were brought in under horrific conditions. They worked in the depths of the mines with little food, no safety, and no choice. Many never left. Historians still debate the true numbers, how many were brought here, how many died. Mitsubishi has acknowledged its use of forced labor, but stopped short of a full apology. The scars remain buried beneath the stone, whispered about, but rarely addressed directly. After the war, the island continued as a coal mining hub. Families returned. Children went to school in the morning, while fathers descended hundreds of meters below sea level to extract the black gold that fueled Japan's post-war recovery. And then just like that, it stopped. In the 1960s, petroleum began to replace coal as Japan's main energy source. Demand plummeted. The mines closed. And in 1974, Hashima was officially shut down. Mitsubishi evacuated everyone. There was no time for goodbyes. People left furniture, photos, clothing all frozen in place. Imagine walking through an apartment and finding a teacup still sitting on the table. A calendar turned to 1974. A child's toy half buried in dust. That's what Hashima became. Not a ruin from centuries ago, but a time capsule. A city that didn't slowly decay, it just stopped. And that's what makes it so haunting. This isn't an ancient temple or a prehistoric cave. This is mid-century modernism abandoned. It looks familiar, too familiar. The same cement staircases, the same wires, the same broken window panes you might see in your own city if it had been left to rot for 50 years. But here nature reclaims everything. The sea salt corrodes the rebar. Ivy creeps through stairwells. Entire floors have collapsed. Walls lean like exhausted giants. And in the silence, there's no life, just the groan of the wind through shattered glass and the slap of waves against the sea wall. For decades, Hashima was completely off limits. Too dangerous, too politically fraught, too painful. But curiosity never dies. Eventually, small sections were open for guided tours, carefully monitored, tightly restricted. Visitors could walk along designated paths, peek into buildings, and listen to sanitized histories delivered through headsets. But most of the island's still sealed. The interiors of apartment blocks are unstable. Staircases hang in midair. Rusted steel beams poke through crumbling ceilings. And beneath the surface, the mine shafts, miles of tunnel and darkness, still lie there flooded and forgotten. In 2015, Hashima was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, listed as part of Japan's sites of the Meiji Industrial Revolution. That designation stirred controversy. Korea and China protested the recognition, demanding acknowledgement of the forced labor that built the island's wealth. Japan eventually agreed to remember the victims, but the wound remains open. Because Hashima is more than just an abandoned city. It's a monument to ambition and to its cost. A reminder of how far a society will go to fuel progress and what it's willing to leave behind when the coal runs out. The strangest thing is how close it still is. Just 15 kilometers from Nagasaki. You can see it from the shore. Ferries pass it daily. And yet it sits out there like a ghost adrift in the past, untouched by the future. It's been used in movies, documentaries. James Bond fans will recognize it as the villain's lair in Skyfall. But no amount of digital wizardry can recreate the feeling of the real thing. Standing on that cracked concrete, hearing the wind whistle through a schoolroom that hasn't echoed with laughter in 50 years. Seeing nature pull down every wall humans ever built. There's a lesson there. One louder than any speech, stronger than any plaque. Everything we build, every skyscraper, every tunnel, every self-contained island empire is temporary. No matter how solid it seems, no matter how vital, the sea waits, the wind remembers. And when we leave nature, steps back and not as punishment, but as rhythm. So, you step off the island back onto the boat. The concrete city recedes behind you, swallowed by mist and memory. And for a moment, it's easy to forget it ever existed until you turn around. And there it is, a fortress, a skeleton, a whisper of progress, floating in the sea. Now you're heading inland again, but not to a city or a mountain or a jungle. This next place doesn't rise up or reach out. It spreads, quietly, relentlessly. And it isn't blocked by fences or barbed wire. It's not a vault or a bunker. It doesn't need to be, because its very existence is a warning. This is the Woomera Prohibited Area, a massive stretch of sun-blasted emptiness in South Australia that few people have ever seen, and even fewer understand. It covers more ground than many countries over 120,000 square kilometers. That's nearly the size of England. And it is almost entirely closed to the public. Not by accident. This is a place built for secrets. And it has plenty. From the sky, the Woomera Prohibited Area looks like a rust-colored smear across the outback. Salt flats, scrub brush, long, straight roads that go nowhere, an occasional runway, a hangar, maybe a communications dish or two, but no towns, No farms, no power lines. It looks like nothing. And that's exactly what it wants you to think. Because Woomera is by most accounts the largest land-based weapons testing range in the world. Since the 1940s, governments, first the British, then the Australians, have used it to launch tests and quietly forget about all manner of missiles, aircraft, and experimental technology. Rockets, ballistic weapons, drones, satellites, surveillance systems. And that's just what we know about. Historians still debate the full scale of what's happened here, because so much of it is classified. Even now, with declassified maps and museum displays, there are vast areas of Woomera that remain opaque. Not just off limits, but off the record. The name itself sounds innocent enough. Woomera is derived from an Aboriginal term for a spear-throwing tool. But what was once a place of traditional knowledge and deep cultural meaning has, over the decades, become one of the most regulated, monitored, and mysterious landscapes in the Southern Hemisphere. It started after World War II. The British government, looking for wide-open spaces far from prying eyes, struck a deal with Australia. They needed somewhere to test long-range weapons. Australia had land, lots of it. And so, the Woomera Rocket Range was born. They cleared the land, built the infrastructure, and closed the gates. What followed was decades of development shrouded in secrecy. During the Cold War, Woomera became one of the go-to sites for testing guided weapons and rocket technology. Prototypes were launched, engines were fired, debris rained down across hundreds of kilometers, some of it retrieved, some of it not. To this day, there are reports of missile wreckage scattered across the desert-rusted fins, sticking out of sand dunes, fragments half buried in salt pans, marked and left, or just forgotten. And it's not just weapons. Woomera was also a key part of space exploration. The European Launcher Development Organization, what would eventually become part of the European Space Agency, used the range to test rockets like the Blue Streak and Europa series in the 1960s. But you wouldn't know that from walking the ground. There's no gift shop, no stargazing platform, just a handful of rusting towers and radar installations. The desert has reclaimed most of the history here, wrapping it in heat and silence. And then there's the modern chapter, because Woomera never really closed. It simply evolved. Today it's managed by the Australian Department of Defence, and it remains an active testing ground for cutting-edge technologies, some of which are still decades away from public knowledge. Hypersonic weapons, autonomous systems, advanced communications, and more. In recent years, there's been increased interest in Woomera from private aerospace companies. Some hope to use the range for commercial rocket launches, others for high-speed vehicle testing. But the specifics vague, lightly announced, quickly forgotten. This is not the kind of place that wants attention, but it gets it anyway, from satellites, from defense analysts, from people like you and me who wonder what's really going on out there. You could drive through parts of the perimeter on approved roads, of course, and see nothing but red dirt stretching to the horizon. You'd feel like you were alone, but you're not. Not really. There are sensors here, cameras, drones, personnel, and fences. Lots of them. Some are visible, most aren't. If you take a wrong turn or cross the wrong line, you'll know very quickly. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just disappear into a footnote filed away somewhere under unauthorized civilian incursion. And yet, as mysterious as Woomera is, it's not haunted. It doesn't feel cursed or malevolent. It just feels controlled, as if every grain of sand has been counted, every gust of wind measured. You're walking through a landscape that's been repurposed, transformed from ancient land into a blank canvas for modern power. That repurposing isn't without cost. The Woomera prohibited area sits on the traditional lands of several indigenous groups, including the Kokatha people. Much of the testing and development here took place without consultation. Sacred sites were disturbed. Access to ancestral land was denied. In recent years, the Australian government has made gestures toward reconciliation agreements for shared land use, protections for heritage zones. But the legacy remains complicated. Woomera is a place that holds many stories, most of which have been silenced either by policy, by design, or by force. And there's something strange about that silence, because the desert is loud in its own way. The wind rushes across the plains. Dust swirls into spirals. Birds wheel overhead. But beneath that noise is something else. A waiting, a withholding. The desert knows what happened here. It just doesn't feel like telling. And maybe that's what makes Woomera so quietly powerful. It doesn't have to reveal anything. Its very presence is enough. A landscape so vast, so empty, so deliberately invisible that even saying its name out loud feels like knocking on a locked door. You could drive for hours here and never reach the other side. You could camp under the stars and not realize you're sleeping next to a forgotten test site. You could find something in the sand that doesn't have a name and probably never will. And then you'd keep driving, keep wondering, keep not knowing, because Woomera isn't finished. It's just quiet. And that, perhaps, is the most strategic silence of all. From the scorched desert of Woomera, you drift outward again, farther than you've gone before. Past borders, past airspace, past land itself. You are now in the middle of nothing. And not just metaphorically. This is Point Nemo. It's not a structure. It's not a fortress. It's not even an island. It's just coordinates. A place defined entirely by distance. A dot in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean, so far from civilization that the nearest humans are often astronauts orbiting above rather than anyone sailing nearby. Point Nemo is what scientists call an oceanic pole of inaccessibility, the furthest spot on the planet from any landmass. Its name comes from Jules Verne's infamous submarine captain, but the reality is even more mysterious than fiction. Because unlike many of the places we visited, this one has no guards, no locks, no venomous snakes or volcanic heat, no legal barriers or government secrecy. You can go to Point Nemo, but almost no one does, because there's absolutely nothing there. The nearest specks of land are thousands of kilometers away, small, uninhabited islands, like Dusi Motunui and Maher. Even ships rarely pass through. Trade routes avoid it. Flight paths arc above it. And when you arrive, if you were to plot the coordinates exactly and bob at the surface, in a boat you wouldn't see anything but ocean in every direction. It's pure absence, but not empty. That's the strange part. Because Point Nemo, for all its nothingness, is strangely full of symbolism, of speculation, of secrets buried not in sand, but in salt water. For starters, there's what lies below. Roughly 13,000 feet beneath the surface is the ocean floor. A cold, pitch-black landscape that almost no submersible has explored. There are no coral reefs here, no sunken cities or dazzling underwater monuments. Just sediment, water pressure, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. And somewhere down there, a graveyard, They call it the spacecraft cemetery. Since the 1970s, dozens of nations have used Point Nemo as a final resting place for decommissioned satellites, cargo ships, and even space stations. When an object in orbit can no longer be safely operated or controlled, mission engineers plan its descent to splash down at the one spot on Earth least likely to harm anyone. And that's here. Point Nemo. Between 1971 and 2016, over 260 spacecraft were guided into this watery grave. That includes major components of the Russian Mir space station and fragments of China's Tiangong-1. If you were to stand on the seafloor beneath Point Nemo, assuming you could survive the pressure and cold, you'd be surrounded by twisted metal, scorched hulls, fragments of heat shields, data drives, and melted solar panels. The remains of our skyward dreams. Historians still debate whether any of those fragments ever drifted to land, whether some rogue piece of satellite escaped the calculations and made its way toward a coast. But so far, Point Nemo has held. The ocean here is deep, the currents strange, and the distance, well, that takes care of the rest. But that's not the only strange thing about this place. In 1997, a team from NOAA, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, was using hydrophones to monitor undersea sounds. They picked up something unusual, a loud, ultra-low frequency noise that reverberated across more than 3,000 miles of water. It was unlike anything they'd heard before. They called it the bloop. At first, theories swirled. Was it a geological event? A shifting plate? A new kind of whale? Something else? And then came the speculative whispers, the theories that refused to die. What if it wasn't geological at all? What if something alive made that sound? The fact that the bloop originated near Point Nemo didn't help. The place already carried an aura of mystery. The most remote ocean on the planet. The least disturbed by noise or pollution. A vast acoustic blind spot. If something enormous were hiding out in the ocean, where else would it go? Eventually, NOAA concluded that the sound was likely caused by ice quakes, massive chunks of Antarctic ice breaking off and shifting under pressure. But the legend stuck. People still bring it up, still search for the sound online, still wonder, because Point Nemo feels like the kind of place where secrets should live, not because there's evidence, but because there's space. In a world that's mapped to the centimeter, where GPS tracks our every step, and satellites can zoom in on your front porch, Point Nemo is a paradox. It's precisely measured, yet profoundly unknown. We know where it is. We just don't really know what it is, and maybe that's the point. There's no tourism here, no guided expeditions, no research base bobbing nearby. Oceanographers might pass through occasionally, but there's little incentive to stop. No resources, no reefs, no fame. Just a sense of drifting farther from humanity with every hour. If you were to float here long enough, the absence would start to feel heavy, like a presence in reverse. The sky goes on forever. The ocean below stretches wider than your fear. And the world, no matter how connected it's become, feels impossibly far away. Point Nemo isn't beautiful. It isn't dangerous. It's indifferent. And that might be the most mysterious quality of all. You could visit a volcano and feel awe. Walk through a bone-filled catacomb and feel dread. But here, in the middle of nothing, you feel something subtler. A kind of cosmic shrug. As if the Earth itself is reminding you not everything exists for you to find. And if you listen closely, really listen, you won't hear answers. You'll hear only the water stretching outward. And beneath it all, far below the quiet, corroding skeletons of humanity's discarded dreams. A satellite here, a panel there, echoes of ambition, and somewhere out in the dark, a sound we still don't quite understand. So you float, held by water and distance, and then you leave, because you can't stay here forever. Point Nemo doesn't offer welcome, but it does offer perspective. From the middle of nowhere, you descend into the middle of everything, right beneath your feet. Because this next place isn't hidden on a faraway island or buried beneath bureaucratic denial. It's directly beneath one of the most famous cities in the world, a place teeming with art culture, wine traffic, tourists, and life. Above, it's the Paris, you know, the Eiffel Tower, the cafes, the charm. But below, a city of the dead. You are now walking through the catacombs of Paris. At first, it might feel like just another old tunnel, a bit damp, dimly lit, narrow walls carved from limestone. You hear the shuffle of footsteps ahead. A tour group, maybe. Nothing unusual. But then you round a corner, and it hits you. The walls are made of bones, not behind glass, not behind rope barriers. Right there, lining the corridor, skulls stacked neatly in rows, femurs and tibias packed like bricks. Thousands upon thousands of bones arranged in patterns repeating through passage after passage after passage. This isn't a Halloween prop. It's real, and it goes on for miles. Officially, the Paris catacombs house the remains of over 6 million people. That's more than the current living population of the city above. And they weren't buried here in life. They were moved, dug up from overflowing cemeteries during the 18th and 19th centuries, when the city's graveyards became literal health hazards. Back then, cemeteries like Les Innocents had been used for centuries. Bodies were buried and reburied. The ground swelled. Sometimes bones would rise to the surface after heavy rains. The smell, let's just say it wasn't good for real estate values. Eventually, city officials decided something had to be done. And beneath the city, they found a solution: quarries. Centuries earlier, limestone had been extracted from beneath Paris to build the very buildings that now leaned precariously over unstable ground. The old tunnels had been abandoned, forgotten, until someone realized they were the perfect place to relocate the dead. Beginning in the 1780s, carts of bones were wheeled through the streets of Paris at night, covered, silent, accompanied by priests, processions of the forgotten. They were carried below the city and carefully arranged, stacked, sorted, placed with eerie precision. Skulls were used to create arches and crosses. Long bones filled in the walls like mortar. Some sections include plaques, dates, or poetic inscriptions, but most just silence. Historians still debate exactly how many bones were moved, how many cemeteries were emptied, how many names were lost. The answer is almost all of them. Down here, identities dissolve. There are no headstones, no epitaphs, just a quiet equality in death. And yet, it doesn't feel entirely peaceful. The air is cool and still. The stone absorbs sound. Your footsteps echo weirdly, bouncing off bone. Every now and then, you see a water droplet fall from the ceiling. You flinch. There's no natural light, no windows. Just your flashlight or the dim electric glow strung along the main passage. And for all the care that went into these ossuaries, the further you wander from the public section, the more chaotic it becomes. There are tunnels and side chambers sealed and unsealed, piles of disorganized remains, forgotten alcoves. Only a small section of the catacombs is officially open to visitors about 1.5 kilometers, but the network below Paris stretches over 300 kilometers. Not all of it holds bones. Some are empty, some have collapsed, some are underwater, and some are something else entirely. There's a subculture in Paris called les cataphiles, urban explorers who slip through sewer grates, storm drains, and forgotten staircases to reach the restricted zones of the catacombs. They've mapped the tunnels by hand-painted murals on the walls, built secret chambers for concerts and film screenings. One group even constructed a full underground movie theater, complete with a projection room and bar. The police discovered it by accident in 2004. When they returned to investigate, it was gone. Just a note, do not try to find us. There are rooms called the chapel, the beach, the crypt of the lovers. There are tunnels marked only by scrawled symbols or tags. A strange hidden geography known only to a handful of people who move in the shadows beneath the most romantic city on earth. And with that secrecy comes risk. Getting lost in the catacombs is not just a bad day, it can be fatal. The tunnels twist and loop. Landmarks vanish in the dark. Flooding can occur without warning. There are stories, some confirmed, others more myth than fact, of people who wandered too far and never came back. One famous legend tells of a camcorder found deep underground containing footage of a man's final moments. The film ends in panicked breathing and darkness. No body was recovered. But the story continues to circulate. Because in a place like this, the line between history and horror is paper thin. Yet, despite all of that, despite the bones, the darkness, the weight of 6 million souls, the Paris catacombs aren't scary in the usual sense. They're not out to shock you. They're not theatrical. They're just there. A permanent reminder that beneath the elegance and glamour of Paris lies something much older. Something built from the one thing all people have in common: mortality. You climb the narrow spiral staircase back to the surface. It's long. You're dizzy by the top. And when you emerge into the light and sound and chaos of modern life, it's hard to believe what's beneath you. A city above and a city below. One bustling with cafes and music, the other lined with skulls, and the only thing separating them, a bit of stone, and the choice not to look down. You've walked among the dead. Now it's time to climb toward the living. But you won't find them at the summit, because no one's ever reached it. You're deep in the Karakoram range of northern Pakistan, a jagged realm of rock and ice where mountains stab at the sky like broken teeth. This is not the Himalayas of postcards and documentaries. There are no guided treks here, no tea houses with warm soup. What you're looking at isn't Everest or K2. It's something far more elusive. You're standing at the base of Machu Picchu, and no one, not a single climber in history, has made it to the top. It's not the tallest mountain in the world. It's not even the tallest in Pakistan. At roughly 7,453 meters, or about 24,500 feet, it sits below the giants of the region. But Machu Picchu holds a record of a different kind. It's the highest known unclimbed mountain in the world that is legally climbable. Think about that. Every other peak of this size has been summited, conquered, flag planted, and photo documented. But Machu Picchu, it stands alone, not because it's forbidden by religion or politics, but because it simply won't let anyone win. The mountain lies in the Batura Muztagh subrange and offshoot of the Karakoram, already one of the most remote and rugged mountain systems on Earth. To get here, you don't just hop a flight and take a taxi. You hike for days, maybe weeks, through barren valleys, across unstable moraines, over glacial rivers that swallow bridges every year. And once you reach the base, the mountain stares down at you like it knows something you don't. The terrain is brutal. Ice cliffs, vertical walls, constant rockfall, avalanches without warning. There are no established routes, no ropes left by previous teams. Every expedition starts from zero. Every step must be carved from chaos. Historians still debate whether any summit attempt has come within a few hundred meters of the top. There are no local legends of anyone standing at the summit. No aerial footage from drones showing a boot print in the snow. No triumphant photos. Just a lot of effort and a lot of turning back. The first serious attempt came in 2003 by a Spanish team. They made some progress, but the southwest face proved too dangerous, too steep, too unstable. They returned home with frostbitten fingers and unspoken frustration. Others followed, each trying a new line, a different strategy. Solo climbers, light and fast duos, teams with oxygen, teams without. All of them met the same fate: snowpack collapse, icefall, gear failure. The weather turning so quickly it felt personal. The most successful attempt came in 2020 when a small British team made it higher than anyone before. They climbed above 6,000 meters. The summit was close, almost in reach. But a shift in the snow told them everything they needed to know. They turned back, not because they were weak, but because they wanted to come back at all. Climbers talk about Muchu Chish with reverence, not fear, but something adjacent. They don't roll their eyes or scoff at its height. They respect it, the way you respect an animal that hasn't blinked yet, the way you respect a storm when you hear the first low rumble. Because this mountain isn't just difficult, it's disinterested. It doesn't fight you. It doesn't try to beat you. It just waits. It knows most of you won't make it, and that's fine. What makes this even more remarkable is that the mountain is legally accessible. Some unclimbed peaks around the world are off limits due to cultural or spiritual reasons. In Bhutan, for example, Gangkhar Puensum, often cited as the highest unclimbed mountain in the world, is sacred and climbing is prohibited. But Muchu Chish has no such protection. No permits are denied for spiritual reasons. No religious edict bars the way, and still it stands untouched. Even the locals in the few small villages scattered through the valley speak of the mountain with a shrug. They don't claim it. They don't mythologize it. It's not a holy place. It's just unreachable. And in a strange way, that makes it more haunting, because there's no grand legend of a monster at the peak. No god whispering through the snow. No ancient curse etched into the ice. There's just the wind and the mountain, and your own heartbeat pounding like a warning drum. The remoteness of Muchu Chish adds another layer to its mystery. The Batura Valley, which leads to the base, is among the least explored regions in the Karakoram. The landscape feels like another planet's scree-covered slopes, glacial tongues, silent walls of granite. The rivers change course without asking. The weather systems bloom and vanish like moods. There are no Sherpa teams here. No fixed ropes. No rescue helicopters waiting in the wings. If something goes wrong, you're on your own. And up here, things always go wrong. The few climbers who've returned speak of the psychological weight, the loneliness, the vastness, the feeling that you're not just isolated, you're forgotten. Like the mountain isn't keeping a record of who came, just who stayed. And yet, the temptation remains. Because Muchu Chish is real. It's right there, on maps, in photos. A summit that exists with no flag, no name carved into a rock, no trail of oxygen canisters marking the way. It's a blank. And blanks to humans are irresistible. Every year someone considers it. Every year a new name appears on an expedition permit. A new line is drawn on a hypothetical route. A new hope. And every year so far, the mountain stays silent. There's a beauty in that. Not everything is meant to be climbed. Not every wilderness is meant to be tamed. And not every story needs a hero at the top. Sometimes the point isn't the summit. It's the mystery. The fact that in our hyper-documented GPS-pinned drone-mapped world, one mountain still says no and means it. So, you turn your gaze upward toward snow that no foot has ever touched, toward cliffs that remain unnamed, toward a summit that has only ever known wind and sky. Muchuchish isn't daring you. It's simply waiting. And so far, it always wins. Now you're not going up or out, you're going down. But not into stone catacombs or boreholes of Soviet ambition. This descent is different. It's slower, wetter, stranger. Because now you're not entering darkness through stairs or tunnels. You're slipping into it. Through a still pool of water, hidden beneath a tangle of green. Welcome to the cenotes of the Yucatan Peninsula. At first, they look almost idyllic. Tropical sinkholes surrounded by jungle. Clear blue water, ringed with vines. Birds flitting from branch to branch. Sunlight streaming down in golden shafts. The kind of place you'd expect to swim, float, breathe, but go deeper and you'll feel it. A change, not in the water, but in you, because these are no ordinary swimming holes. These are portals into ancient limestone labyrinths, into flooded caverns the size of cathedrals, into places where no sunlight has ever touched the walls. And no map can fully chart the way. Cenotes are formed when limestone bedrock collapses, revealing the groundwater beneath. But in the Yucatan, they're more than geological accidents. They're everywhere, thousands of them, and some are connected to vast underwater cave systems that stretch for miles beneath the surface. It's a hidden network, a second world. Some cenotes are shallow, scenic, safe. Others, they're monsters in disguise. Take Zacaton, for example. One of the deepest water-filled sinkholes in the world, plunging over 100 feet straight down. So deep that NASA has used robotic submersibles here to simulate space missions, testing how machines might navigate the oceans of Europa or the frozen depths of Enceladus. Then, there's the vast Sac Actun system, a maze of submerged tunnels that stretches more than 350 kilometers beneath the jungle floor. Divers have spent decades mapping it, sometimes swimming for hours through narrow rock corridors, with only inches of clearance between their tanks and the stone. And here's where it gets unsettling. You could be walking through the jungle and have no idea what lies beneath you. Entire cave chambers, some the size of football fields, just a few feet below the soil. You can't hear them, can't feel them, but they're there, waiting. Historians still debate how many cenotes were used for ritual purposes by the ancient Maya. What they don't debate is how important these places were. To the Maya, cenotes were sacred openings into Xibalba, the underworld, places where the living could speak to the gods and the dead. Many cenotes contain evidence of ritual offerings, pots, carved stones, tools, jewelry, and yes, bones. Human remains that have been carefully placed or thrown into the depths. Sacrifices to appease gods or guide the dead. Some skulls show signs of trauma. Others are eerily intact, preserved in mineral-rich waters for centuries. No decay, just stillness. And those are just the ones we've found. Many cenotes haven't been explored at all. Too remote, too dangerous. Some lie on private land. Others are simply too deep to reach safely. The water can become silty in seconds. One misplaced fin stroke and visibility drops to zero. You're not swimming, you're floating blind in a rock throat that stretches into forever. There's a quiet terror in that. Experienced cave divers train for years to handle the stress of diving in cenotes. They use guidelines, careful planning, and redundant equipment. And still accidents happen. Divers have drowned. Others have vanished. Some caves may never give back what they take, and yet the exploration continues because each descent brings discoveries, new chambers, new formations, ancient artifacts untouched by time. Some of the most significant archaeological finds in recent history have come from the cenotes of the Yucatan. Skeletons of extinct animals, bones of the earliest known humans in the Americas, a submerged library of Earth's deep past. And as we learn more, we also learn how little we know. Some cenotes connect to each other in ways we never expected. Divers drop into one hole only to emerge hours later through another dozens of kilometers away. Underwater tunnels link not just caverns, but entire ecosystems. Water flows, life circulates, time lingers. You begin to realize the jungle above is only half the story. Below, there's another world, silent, cold, forgotten, and not all of it is natural. In the darkest recesses of these underwater caves, archaeologists have discovered evidence of human presence fires lit in dry caverns thousands of years ago, before rising water sealed them off forever. Marks on the walls, charcoal from torches, the traces of people who ventured into these places when they were dry and may have never made it back out. What were they doing down there? Rituals, burials, exploration. Historians still debate, but the feeling is unmistakable. As you swim deeper into a cenote, you're not just moving through space. You're moving through layers of time. Each chamber takes you further from the present. The air grows cooler. The silence becomes more complete. Even light feels ancient here. And if you turn off your lamp, you are in the most absolute darkness that exists on this earth. Not night, not a cave with a crack of daylight around the bend. Real, eternal black. And in that blackness, you float. Breath steady. Pulse loud in your ears. And you realize something strange. You're not scared. You're humbled. Because these places don't want you. They tolerate you for a moment. Then they remind you who's in charge. The cenotes are not thrill rides. They are thresholds. You don't conquer them. You cross into them. Carefully, briefly, then leave. And when you do, when your head breaks the surface and the sunlight blinds you, the world feels different. Louder, shallower. You feel for a moment like you've been on the other side of something, not just underwater, but somewhere else entirely. You towel off, pack your gear, step back into the jungle, and behind you, the cenote closes quietly, as if it never opened at all. Now you go north, far north, past the last tree, past the last road, past the edge of where most people would even consider living. The sky stretches wide here, pale and endless. The air is sharp dry and so clean it almost stings your nose. The ground hard as stone never thaws. You've arrived in Svalbard, a scattering of icy islands in the Arctic Ocean halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. And nestled into the side of a frozen mountain. Under layers of permafrost and silence is a door. Behind that door is a hallway, and at the end of that hallway, sealed off from the wind and the world, is the most important refrigerator on Earth. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It doesn't look like much. A concrete slab cutting into the rock with a glowing geometric light sculpture above it. The kind of entrance that could lead to a modern art exhibit or a Cold War bunker. It's neither. Inside, beneath the ice, are over 1 million seed samples, tiny genetic time capsules. Quiet, unblinking guardians of the world's food supply: wheat, rice, barley, beans, sorghum, seeds from every continent, from farms that no longer exist, from crops that fed empires, from species now extinct in the wild, all packed in foil, sealed in boxes, cataloged and frozen, waiting for a future that ideally never arrives. Because the Svalbard Seed Vault is not a museum. It's a backup drive for civilization. If something goes wrong, if war, fire, flood, or famine wipes out local seed banks, countries can request copies of what they stored here. They can replant, recover, begin again. It's insurance. Not against apocalypse necessarily, but against erosion. The slow, grinding erosion of biodiversity, of memory, of time. Historians still debate how best to preserve culture, books, art, language. But for food, it's the seed. Everything starts with a seed. The vault is built for the long haul. It was carved into the sandstone of Plateau Berget, a mountain chosen for its geological stability. No earthquakes, no floods. Even if the power goes out, the surrounding permafrost will keep the seeds frozen. It's 130 meters into the rock, humidity controlled, temperature regulated to 18 degrees C. That's just below 0 degrees Celsius. Not just cold enough to pause life, but to suspend it. The location was chosen for more than just geology. Svalbard is politically stable, far from conflict, remote enough to deter casual intrusion, close enough for access when needed. There are no daily tours, no gift shop, no buzzing activity. In fact, it's mostly empty. The vault isn't staffed full-time. Seeds are delivered in batches received through short, quiet ceremonies, often involving scientists and ambassadors in parkas, and snow boots holding steel boxes like offerings to the future. They're placed inside the vault, logged, sealed, and then the door closes again. What's inside isn't owned by the vault. The seeds remain the property of the depositing countries and institutions. Norway merely keeps the freezer running and the snow out. A quiet stewardship, not a claim. But still, the symbolism is enormous. You walk into a hallway filled with metal shelving units, and you're staring at the DNA of Earth's harvest. Thousands of years of farming, of selective breeding, of survival, of culture. Some of these seeds are common wheat strains that feed billions. Others are obscure millets from mountain villages, grains once thought irrelevant, now rediscovered as climate change shifts what the land can grow. Because yes, that's part of this story too. The seed vault is not just about catastrophe, it's about adaptation. The future is unpredictable. Rainfall patterns shift, pests evolve, temperatures rise. A strain of barley that grows beautifully in France today might be worthless tomorrow. But in Svalbard, there might be an ancient cousin, tucked away one, with the right genes, the right resistance. The key, that's the beauty of biodiversity, and the danger of losing it. Seeds are disappearing all the time. not because of drama, but because of speed. Monoculture farming favors a few high-yield crops. Commercial pressures erase regional varieties. Political instability topples local seed banks. The vault in Aleppo, Syria, once one of the most important in the Middle East, was damaged during the war. Its collection backed up in Svalbard. When the war disrupted, the ability to grow staple crop seeds were withdrawn from the vault for replanting. That's not a hypothetical. That's the system working. Of course it's not perfect. Climate change has already crept up the mountain. In 2016, unusually warm temperatures caused meltwater to flood the entrance tunnel, though not the seeds themselves. The structure was reinforced, the design reevaluated, but the message was clear. Even the future-proof vault isn't immune to the future. Still it stands, cold, silent, waiting. And when you look at it, not just as a facility, but as a symbol, you realize what it really is. Hope. It's hope in foil packets, hope with barcodes and shelf labels, hope frozen in nitrogen and ice, not just for a return to the past, but for the possibility of a future. A green one, a nourished one, because for all our skyscrapers and satellites, we still eat from the soil. And when the soil fails us, or when we fail, we will need what's behind that door. The Svalbard Seed Vault doesn't pretend to fix the world. It simply prepares quietly. So you turn away from the entrance, your boots crunching over snow and gravel. The aurora flickers somewhere above. The mountain behind you hums with cold, and down below, sealed in darkness, millions of tiny lives lie dormant, waiting not to be remembered, but to be used. And now you've reached the edge. Not the end of the world, exactly, but the final chapter in this journey through its strangest corners. You've walked through acid pools and abandoned cities, climbed ice-laced volcanoes, drifted over shipwreck-strewn waters and under bone-stacked cathedrals of the dead. You've seen secrets the earth keeps under lock and key, and others it leaves lying out in the open, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to come close. But some places, they're not hiding. They're just resisting. Not with violence, not with walls, but with silence, stillness, with the quiet understanding that we don't need to go everywhere. We don't need to touch everything. Some parts of this world were never meant for our footprints. They exist, and that's enough. Let's step back through them now, gently, one more time. You remember Bouvet Island, the most inaccessible island on Earth. Just 19 square miles of frozen lava and fog in the middle of nowhere. No harbor, no history. And yet somehow, a lifeboat appeared there in 1964, perfectly intact, with no one to claim it. An unexplained arrival in a place that doesn't let anything stay. You drifted through room 39 in the heart of Pyongyang, a room so secret even most North Koreans don't know it exists. It's not a room, really, but a vast financial machine hidden behind false storefronts and fake companies, funding a regime through counterfeit bills and cyber heists, a ghost in the global economy. You walked across the cracking salt and bubbling acid of the Danakil Depression, where the Earth is quite literally coming apart geologically, chemically, and maybe even spiritually. The most hostile place on the planet. Water with a pH of 0. Ground that crumbles under your boots. Beauty so dangerous it almost feels deliberate. You stood on Snake Island, where the trees sway with vipers, and the rocks are alive with golden fangs. An ecosystem ruled by one species, deadly and precise. Not forbidden by law, but by nature itself. You look down into Mount Michael, where a lava lake churns beneath Antarctic snow. One of the rarest geological features on Earth, hiding inside a volcano no one's ever climbed. Not because we haven't tried, but because it just doesn't let us. You walk the halls of Poveglia Island, where centuries of plague quarantine and silence have soaked into the stone. A place not just abandoned, but avoided. Not because of superstition, but because of memory. Because history, when concentrated enough, leaves an aftertaste. You hovered over the green ceiling of the Javari Valley, where uncontacted tribes live beyond satellites and law. A world that has chosen not to know us, and asked politely but firmly that we return the favor. You peered down the Kola super deep borehole, where Soviet scientists drilled deeper than anyone ever had, and then stopped, not because they ran out of curiosity, but because the earth got too hot, too loud, too unwilling. A reminder that we may know the stars, but we don't even understand the dirt. You trudged across the alien plains of Devon Island, the largest uninhabited island in the world, where NASA simulates life on Mars. Because it's easier to pretend we're on another planet there than almost anywhere else on this one. You paused outside the fences of Mount Weather, the United States' ultimate emergency bunker, where the lights stay on and the doors stay closed for everyone who's not on the list. You ferried past Hashima Island, the fortress of concrete once filled with coal miners and school children, now hollow, eroding, not from centuries of time, but from decades of abandonment, a modern ruin with a modern ghost. You trace the red dust of the Woomera Prohibited Area, the largest land-based weapons test range in the world, where entire technologies vanish into the horizon. Not ancient, not mythological, just very classified. You floated over Point Nemo, the most remote spot in the ocean where decommissioned space stations are sent to die, where the sea holds more silence than sound, and maybe something else. You wound through the catacombs of Paris, where 6 million skulls whisper beneath the cobbled streets, stacked in neat patterns, ordered, silent, equal in the end. You stared up at Machu Picchu, the tallest unclimbed mountain on Earth you're legally allowed to attempt. A summit that remains untouched, not by decree, but by refusal. You plunged into the Yucatan cenotes, where the water runs colder, deeper, darker, where ancient rites echo in the stone and breath runs short as the light fades out. You reach the frozen door of the Svalbard Seed Vault, a refrigerator for the end of the world, where humanity's genetic memory is kept cold and quiet, just in case we forget how to grow things. And all of it leads you here, to this moment, to this simple truth that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to remind us of scale, of humility, that this earth, for all our naming and measuring and mapping, is still gloriously beyond us in places. And that's a gift, because in a world where everything is reviewed, revealed, uploaded, and shared, it's comforting to know there are still places without signal, without signs, without stories we can own. These aren't lost cities or fantasy worlds. They're real, measured, mapped, seen from space, but they're still unknown. And maybe that's why we're drawn to them, not to conquer, but to remember that the earth isn't ours. We're just visiting, and some doors, they never open. Now that the last door has closed behind you and the final step has been retraced, the world feels a little bigger, doesn't it? Not because it's grown, but because you've seen the parts that refuse to shrink. You've drifted from ice to fire, from skull-lined tunnels to mountains no one has claimed. You've stood where no one lives, where no one climbs, where no one even dares to touch. Some of these places were sealed by metal, some by myth, some by rules, and some by nothing at all, just a quiet force that says, in its own way, not for you. And you listened. You didn't break in. You didn't blast through. You walked gently, asked questions, and let the silence answer for itself. Because what matters most about these places isn't what's hidden inside them. It's the way they push back. The way they remind you that mystery still exists, not in fantasy novels or ancient ruins, but here in the real physical world. In the cold, the wind, the places where the signal drops and the map fades and the door never opens. So when you go to sleep tonight, think about that somewhere out there right now is an island wrapped in fog, a cave filled with bones, a seed lying cold beneath Arctic rock, a mountain peak where no human has ever breathed, waiting, not for you, not for anyone, just waiting. Good night, explorer, and don't worry, the Earth still has secrets,